I stood there in a borrowed dress, watching my brother accept an award for a masterpiece I had created. The spotlight hit him, and he smiled a smile I knew was as hollow as a wine barrel after bottling. Then, as I moved to join him on stage, a security guard put a firm hand on my arm. My own mother, standing beside him, leaned in and whispered, her voice like ice. "Not now, Clara. You're making a scene. People are watching." The press photographer asked who I was, and my mother, without missing a beat, smiled graciously and said, "Oh, she's just his assistant. So proud." That night, I didn't just leave the gala. I left the life I knew. 3 months later, they weren't just asking for my forgiveness. They were begging for my secrets. It was supposed to be the biggest night of our lives. The Solstice Wine Gala. It's the Oscars for vintners. A sea of black ties, glittering gowns, and the delicate clinking of glasses that cost more than my car. Our family winery, Viridian Vines, was nominated for Vintage of the Year. Not just nominated. We were the front runner. Everyone knew it. The whispers had been circulating for months. The vintage was called Aria, and it was my soul in a bottle. I'd spent 2 years perfecting it, obsessing over every detail from the soil pH to the precise moment of harvest under a full moon. Something my grandfather had taught me was more than just superstition. Our table was front and center. My mother, Eleanor, looked regal in a deep emerald gown, the matriarch holding court. She was the business mind, the iron will that had turned my grandfather's humble vineyard into a respected name. My brother, Leo, sat beside her, soaking in the admiration. Leo was the face of Viridian Vines. He was handsome, charismatic, and could talk about wine with a poetic flair that charmed critics and buyers alike, even if he couldn't tell a Merlot from a Malbec in a blind taste test. He was the story. I was the storyteller. He was the sun. I was the engine room, hidden deep in the earth, making it all run. I felt a knot of anxiety and hope tightening in my stomach. This was it, the moment of validation. For years I had worked in the cool, quiet cellars, my hands stained purple, my world revolving around fermentation charts and the subtle language of the grapes. I didn't mind the shadows. In fact, I preferred them. I was quiet, introverted. Leo was built for the spotlight. "We all have our roles, Clara," my mother would say, a gentle but firm reminder. "Leo brings in the world, and you create the world he brings them to. It's a perfect partnership." And for a long time, I believed her. I loved the work. I loved the legacy. I loved the feeling of taking something from the earth and transforming it into art. The credit? That felt secondary. As long as the wine was good, as long as Viridian Vines thrived, I was content. But lately, the partnership had started to feel less like a symphony and more like a solo with a forgotten backup singer. Leo's name was on the interviews. Leo's face was in the magazines. When a famous sommelier had praised the complex notes of my last vintage, Leo had taken him on a tour, repeating the exact tasting notes I had written for him that morning, passing them off as his own spontaneous insights. I stood in the background, topping up their glasses, and smiled when I was told to. Tonight felt different. Aria wasn't just another vintage. It was a breakthrough. It was the culmination of everything my grandfather had taught me. A tribute to his memory. It was risky, unconventional, and everyone in the industry was talking about it. Even I knew this was my moment. I'd let Leo be the frontman for years, but this award, Winemaker of the Year, was the unspoken prize that came with the Vintage Award. This had to be for me. We hadn't discussed it, but how could it be any other way? The host on stage, a celebrity chef with impossibly white teeth, was opening the envelope. The camera panned to our table. Leo gave my hand a squeeze under the table, a gesture that was meant to look like supportive camaraderie, but felt more like a warning. And the Vintage of the Year goes to Viridian Vines for Aria. The table erupted. My mother kissed Leo on both cheeks. People were clapping, turning to smile at him. For a split second, I was frozen in a bubble of pure, unadulterated joy. We did it. I did it. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Leo was already striding towards the stage, waving to the crowd. I moved to follow him, to stand by his side, just like we'd always planned in my head. That's when it happened. The security guard, a mountain of a man in a tight suit, stepped in front of me. "Ma'am, please." His voice was polite but unyielding. I blinked, confused. I'm with him," I stammered, pointing at Leo, who was now hugging the chef on stage. My mother was suddenly at my elbow. Her grip was like steel. "Clara, what are you doing? Sit down," she hissed, her smile never faltering for the audience. "But it's Aria," I whispered, my voice sounding small and foreign. "I'm the winemaker. Leo is accepting the award for the family," she corrected me, her eyes flashing with a cold fire I'd seen before, but never had it directed at me with such force. "This is not the time or the place. Know your role." A photographer, sensing a minor drama, pointed his camera our way. "Is everything all right? Who is this?" he asked my mother. Eleanor's face transformed instantly, softening into a mask of warm maternal pride. "Oh, this is Clara, Leo's wonderful assistant," she said, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "She works so hard behind the scenes. We'd be lost without her. Now, if you'll excuse us, this is my son's moment. His assistant." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I stumbled back into my chair, the sounds of the room fading into a dull roar. On stage, Leo was holding the gleaming trophy. "I want to thank my family," he was saying, his voice resonating through the grand hall. "My mother, the visionary, and my grandfather, who taught me everything I know." He never mentioned my name, not once. I watched him, a stranger in my brother's skin, accepting praise for my work, for my heart, for my soul, which I had poured into that bottle. And in that moment, under the brilliant, merciless lights of the gala, I felt something inside me break. It wasn't a loud shatter. It was a quiet, clean snap. The part of me that believed in our dream, in family over everything, died right there at table 7. I was just the assistant, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I could never go back to the cellar again. The drive home was silent. My mother attempted small talk about the after parties we were missing. Leo was texting, the screen of his phone illuminating a self-satisfied smirk. I just stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of meaningless color. The heavy, beautiful trophy, sat on the seat between me and my brother. A cold, metal barrier. When we got back to the estate, I went straight to my small cottage on the property, the one place that was truly mine. I didn't say good night. The next morning, I didn't wake up at 5 a.m. for my usual walk through the vines. I didn't check the temperature in the fermentation tanks. I didn't answer the dozen texts from Leo asking for the talking points for his 10 a.m. interview with Wine Spectator. Instead, I sat at my small wooden desk with a cup of black coffee and opened a fresh notebook. I started to write, not tasting notes, not blending percentages. I started to document my life's work. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost. I worked methodically, unearthing years of records, my old blending journals, filled with my distinctive handwriting, emails to suppliers where I specified the exact type of French oak barrels to be used, a decision Leo had later claimed as his own stroke of genius in a trade magazine. Lab reports and soil analyses I had conducted myself. I compiled a timeline, a meticulous, undeniable record of my contribution to every successful vintage Viridian vines had produced in the last decade. It wasn't about revenge. Not at first. It was about proof. It was about reclaiming the person they had tried to erase at that gala. I was building an arc of my own identity, one piece of evidence at a time. During this time, a man named Julian Croft had left me 2 voicemails. Julian was one of the most respected and feared wine critics in the world. He was known for his discerning palate and his intolerance for marketing fluff. He had been a judge at the gala. His first message was simple congratulations. The second was more curious. "Clara," his voice said, a thoughtful, low baritone. "It's Julian Croft again. I had a glass of Aria again last night, away from all the noise of the gala. There's something singular about it. It doesn't taste like anything else Viridian has produced. It's personal. I was hoping to speak with the true artist behind it. Give me a call." He knew. Somehow, he knew. He hadn't bought the story of the charismatic frontman. He had tasted the truth in the glass. I saved the voicemail. It became the final piece of my arc. My quiet protest was about to find its voice. My mother had told me to know my role. And I finally did. My role was not to be the assistant. It was to be the owner of my own work. And my family, who had built their empire on my silent labor, had no idea the ground was about to shift beneath their feet. To understand how I let it get to that point, you have to understand my grandfather, Alistair. He wasn't the founder of Viridian Vines. He was Viridian Vines. He smelled of soil and oak and sunshine. While my mother was in the office turning his passion into a profitable business, and my father was... well, my father was mostly just there. A quiet, agreeable shadow. Alistair was in the vineyards. And I was his shadow. Leo was never interested. He hated the dirt, the bees, the pre-dawn chill. He wanted the finished product, the fancy dinners, the applause. But I loved it. My grandfather saw it. He'd hold a grape up to the light and say, "See that, Clara? That's not just skin. That's a coat. It protects all the stories inside. Your job isn't to force the stories out. It's to listen and give them a safe place to be told." He taught me to read the vines, to understand the rhythm of the seasons, to trust my palate above all else. "You have the gift," he'd tell me. his voice a low rumble. "Don't ever let anyone convince you it's not yours." He died when I was 19, the summer after my first year of oenology school. It was sudden, a heart attack in the middle of the vineyard. He loved. His death left a vacuum that my mother, Eleanor, was all too ready to fill. She was a brilliant businesswoman. I'll give her that. She saw the potential for a brand, a story, a legacy, and that story needed a face. I was too young, too quiet, too devastated by grief to be that face. I just wanted to make wine, to honor his memory in the cellars. Leo, who had just dropped out of his 3rd university program, was bored and looking for a purpose. My mother gave him one. He became the protégé, the heir to Alistair's genius. It started small. The first vintage I made on my own, a crisp, elegant Sauvignon Blanc, won a regional silver medal. At the local awards dinner, Leo accepted it. "He's just better with speeches, honey," my mother explained, patting my hand. "You know how you get nervous? We're a team." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. A team. That's what we were. A few years later, I developed a proprietary yeast strain that gave our Chardonnays a unique, buttery complexity. It was my baby. I'd spent months on it in my small lab. When Decanter magazine wanted to do a feature on it, my mother arranged the interview. With Leo. "His charm will sell the story better, Clara. It's about marketing. You handle the science, he'll handle the sales." I sat in the next room, listening to my brother stumble through an explanation of the yeast cultivation process, feeding him lines through a cracked door when he got stuck. He called it his little experiment. No one corrected him. The one time I tried to break free, it was a disaster. A smaller, innovative winery in Oregon offered me the head winemaker position. It was my dream job, a chance to build my own name, to be my own person. I told my mother, expecting her to be proud. Instead, her face fell. The disappointment was a physical force in the room. "Leave," she said, her voice laced with a theatrical disbelief. "Clara, how could you? After everything we've built together. Viridian is your grandfather's legacy. It's your legacy. You can't just abandon your family." Leo was worse. "You're really going to leave me to handle all this on my own?" he'd said, pacing my cottage. "I can't do this without you, Clara. You know that. I'm the face, but you're the heart. The whole thing will collapse." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. And like a fool, I fell for it. They painted a picture of a broken family, a failing business, all because I wanted to follow my own path. They made my ambition feel like a betrayal. So I stayed. I turned down the job and recommitted to being the silent, essential heart of Viridian Vines. In return, they gave me the cottage, a slightly better salary, and a constant low-grade feeling of being trapped. They didn't use chains. They used loyalty. And I realize now, sitting with my notebooks, that it was the strongest chain of all. My grandfather told me to never let anyone take my gift. I hadn't. I had given it away, freely, all in the name of family. The gala wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was just the first time they'd been arrogant enough to say the quiet part out loud. The call came on a Tuesday. "It's Leo. Where are you?" "The buyers from the hotel group are here. They want to talk about Aria, and you're not answering your phone." His voice was tight with irritation. No hint of concern. I was sitting on my porch, the notebook with my entire case file open on my lap. "I'm not coming in, Leo," I said, my voice calm. It felt strangely powerful. There was a pause. "What do you mean you're not coming in? What am I supposed to tell them? You know I can't answer the technical questions." "I guess you'll have to learn," I said, and a small bitter smile touched my lips. "Or you could tell them the truth. That your assistant, the one who actually made the wine, has taken a personal day." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears in his mind grinding, trying to process this new reality. This wasn't the compliant, quiet Clara he knew. This isn't funny, Clara. Mom is going to be furious. "I'm counting on it," I said, and hung up the phone. 2 hours later, her black SUV crunched up my gravel driveway. She didn't knock. The door to my cottage swung open, and she stood there, flanked by Leo, a queen with her disappointing prince. Her face was a thundercloud. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. "You humiliated Leo this morning. You refused to do your job. You are sabotaging this family." I didn't stand up. I just looked at her, then at my brother, who was avoiding my gaze, looking intently at a crack in the floorboards. "My job?" I repeated softly. "What exactly is my job, Mother? Am I the winemaker? Or am I the assistant?" The word hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic. You know your value here. We are a team. That night at the gala was a simple misunderstanding. We were swept up in the moment." "There was no misunderstanding," I said, my voice level. "You made a choice. You chose the brand over your daughter. You chose the lie because it was more profitable." Leo finally looked up, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. "Come on, Clara. It wasn't like that. You know I appreciate everything you do. Do you?" I asked, leaning forward. "Do you appreciate it enough to tell the world the truth? Do you appreciate it enough to give me the credit for the one thing that is mine and mine alone?" "This is absurd," my mother cut in, taking a step forward. "Viridian Vines is the family's. Everything created under its name belongs to the family. Your grandfather understood that. It's about the legacy, not about individual ego." "My grandfather told me to own my gift," I shot back, my voice finally rising. "He never told me to let my brother wear it like a costume. Aria is mine. The award is mine. The title Winemaker of the Year. That's mine." My mother let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound. "You. Don't be ridiculous, Clara. You can't handle that. You hide in the cellar. You don't have the personality, the grace. You would crumble under the pressure. We protect you." "You don't protect me," I said, standing up slowly, my notebook in my hand. "You hide me. You've built an entire brand on my back and called it protection. Well, the protection is over." I held up the notebook. "This is a record of every blend, every decision, every vintage I have ever created for this family. It's my work, in my words, in my handwriting." Leo's eyes widened. He knew what was in those journals. "And," I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady, "I got a call from Julian Croft, the critic. He wants to talk to the true artist behind Aria. He can tell it's not Leo's work. He's a man who listens to the wine, not the marketing." The color drained from my mother's face. Julian Croft's word was gospel in the industry. An article from him questioning the authenticity of their story would be catastrophic. "What are you saying?" she whispered, her mask of authority finally cracking. "I'm saying you have a choice," I said, feeling a surge of power I'd never known. You can either go public, tell the truth, and give me my proper title. Co-owner and head winemaker with equity to match. Or I will. I will take my story, my journals, and my talent, and I will go to Julian Croft. And we will see which story the world finds more interesting. The charming frontman, or the ghost who built the empire and finally decided to haunt it. They stared at me, speechless. The silence in my little cottage was suddenly vast and terrifying. But for the first time in my life, it was a silence I controlled. I was no longer the assistant. I was the one holding all the cards. The team was officially disbanded. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. My mother alternated between two tactics: icy silence and emotional manipulation. She'd leave voicemails, her voice thick with fake tears, talking about my grandfather and how I was destroying his legacy. He wanted us to be united, Clara. You're tearing his dream apart. Then, an hour later, a clipped email would arrive from her lawyer, reminding me of the non-disclosure agreement I'd signed years ago, a document I barely remembered. Leo, on the other hand, tried a different approach. Desperate, clumsy camaraderie. He showed up at my cottage with a peace offering of takeout from my favorite Thai place. He sat across from me, picking at his pad CU, and talked about how we could fix this. Look, I get it. You're mad, he started, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. I should have mentioned you on stage. I froze. The lights, the crowd, it all just came out. You didn't freeze, Leo, I said, not touching my food. You read a script. The one Mom has been writing for you for 10 years. He flinched. That's not fair. We're a team. I do my part. I'm the one out there, schmoozing, selling, putting up with all those boring distributors. You get to do the fun part, the creative stuff. I almost laughed. The fun part? The 18-hour days during harvest? The constant stress of a fermentation going wrong? The terror of a late frost wiping out a year's work? You think that's the fun part? Okay, fine. It's hard work, he conceded. But we can make this right. We'll give you a raise, a big one. We'll even give you a new title on the website. Head of production or something. How does that sound? Head of production. It was another box. Another way to keep me in the background, away from the title that mattered. Winemaker. No, Leo, I said, pushing my plate away. The time for negotiation is over. My terms are clear. Co-owner, head winemaker, public acknowledgement. Or I walk, and I take the story of Arya with me. He stared at me, his charm finally failing him. You wouldn't, he whispered. It's your name on the line, too. You'd be burning down your own house. It was never my house, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I was just living in it. I'm ready to build my own. He left, the food untouched. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying their arguments in my head, the insidious way they'd woven my identity so tightly with theirs that leaving felt like self-destruction. Was I being selfish? Was I destroying my grandfather's legacy? The doubt crept in. A cold fog. I got my answer the next morning. An email alert popped up on my laptop. It was a new article from a popular wine blog. The headline read, "The Soul of a Winery, Leo Alistair on Family Legacy and the Art of Arya." My blood ran cold. I clicked the link. It was a phoning interview, clearly a PR move orchestrated by my mother. It was filled with pictures of Leo, looking pensive and artistic in the vineyards. He talked at length about his instinctive approach, his deep connection to the land passed down from his grandfather. And then I saw it. The quote that made everything clear. "My sister, Clara, is an invaluable part of our operation," he was quoted as saying. "She's a genius with logistics and management. She keeps the trains running on time so I can focus on the art. We each have our strengths, and we respect that. She's the head, and I'm the heart." He had flipped it. He'd taken my quiet, methodical brilliance and painted it as secretarial. He'd taken his empty charisma and called it art. He didn't just steal my work. He was trying to rewrite my very nature. That was it. The last thread of doubt snapped. This wasn't about family. It was a coup. And they had just made their final fatal move. I picked up my phone, my hand steady, and dialed the number I'd saved. "Julian Croft, please?" The article hit the industry like a thunderclap. It wasn't a sensationalist takedown. Julian's style was far more elegant and far more devastating. The piece was titled "The Ghost in the Bottle." It started by praising Aria as a work of genius, a once-in-a-generation vintage. Then, with surgical precision, Julian began to ask questions. He juxtaposed Leo's charming but technically vague interview quotes with excerpts from my old private blending journals, which I had given him permission to use. He didn't need to call Leo a fraud. He simply laid my detailed, passionate, scientific notes next to Leo's poetic but empty pronouncements, and let the reader draw their own conclusion. He wrote about the history of Viridian vines, about my grandfather Alistair's mentorship, not of his grandson, but of his granddaughter. He described our phone conversation quoting me directly. "A wine tells the story of its maker. You just have to be willing to listen." The article ended with a simple killer line. "After tasting Aria and speaking with Clara, one has to wonder, who is the true author of this masterpiece? And why has her voice been silenced for so long?" The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for my family. The phone at the winery, which had been ringing with congratulatory calls, went eerily quiet. Distributors got nervous. A major restaurant chain that was about to feature Aria put its order on hold, pending clarification. The comments on the wine blog interview with Leo turned vicious. People called him a fraud, a thief, a charismatic parasite. The story of the ghost winemaker was more compelling than the myth of the handsome heir. My phone, however, started ringing for the first time with offers. Not from headhunters, but from owners. The woman from the Oregon winery who had offered me a job years ago called. "I knew it," she said, her voice warm with vindication. "I tasted it in your trial blends back then. The offer still stands, Clara. Or, if you want to start your own thing, I'll be your first investor." Other calls followed. A vineyard in Napa, a boutique operation in Sonoma. They didn't want to hire an assistant. They wanted to partner with an artist. I met with my mother and brother one last time, in the winery's formal tasting room. The air was thick with tension. The Julian Croft article was printed out on the table between us, looking like a death certificate. My mother looked tired, older. The iron matriarch had rusted. "You've ruined us," she said, her voice flat. "Our reputation is in tatters, all because of your ego." "It was never about my ego," I replied calmly. "It was about the truth, a truth you both chose to bury." Leo, for the first time, looked truly broken. The charm was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell us what to do to make this stop." "There's nothing you can do to make it stop," I said. "It's already out there. But I will tell you what I'm going to do. I'm leaving. I'm accepting one of the offers I've received. I will be the head winemaker and partner at a winery that values my name as much as my work." My mother scoffed. "You can't. Your NDA." "My lawyer," I said, savoring the words, "thinks that an NDA signed under coercive circumstances, which was then violated by your own fraudulent misrepresentation of my work, won't hold up very well in court. Especially now that the court of public opinion has already ruled. Do you really want to drag the Viridian name through that?" She paled. She knew it was over. "I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to try to take the winery," I continued. "My grandfather's name is still on the gate, and I won't dishonor that. But I'm taking one thing with me." I paused, letting them wait. "I'm taking the rights to Aria. It was created entirely by me, from a varietal I cultivated. My journals prove its intellectual property is mine. You will cease all production and sales of it, effective immediately." Aria was their golden goose, their only shield against the storm of bad press. Taking it was a mortal blow. Leo looked like he was going to be sick. "You can't," my mother breathed. "I can," I said, standing up. "And I will." I walked to the door of the tasting room, my heels clicking on the cool stone floor. I paused with my hand on the handle and looked back at them, two strangers sitting amidst the wreckage of the empire they had built on a lie. "You told me to know my role," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I do now, and it's not here." And then I walked out into the sunshine, and for the first time in a decade, I felt free. It's been a year. I live in Oregon now. The air here is different, smelling of pine and rain and new beginnings. I took the job. I'm a partner and the head winemaker at a place called Peregrine Crest. We're smaller than Viridian, scrappier, more innovative. My name is on the bottle, right next to the vineyards. My first solo vintage under my own name comes out this fall. It's called Provenance. It means a record of ownership for a work of art. Sometimes at night I scroll through the wine industry news. Viridian Vines is still alive, but it's limping. Leo is still the face, but the charm is gone. Recent reviews of their new vintages are lukewarm, describing them as technically proficient, but lacking a soul. They tried to replicate Aria with a new blend, but everyone could tell it was a soulless copy. A ghost of a ghost. I heard through the grapevine that my mother has been forced to sell off a significant portion of their land to stay afloat. They never reached out. No apologies, no angry recriminations. Just a vast echoing silence. I don't hate them. I think in some strange way, I'm grateful. Their betrayal was the catalyst I needed to claim my own life. It was a painful, brutal lesson in self-worth, but it was a necessary one. The lesson is this: your talent is your own. It's a flame inside you. You can let others warm their hands by it, but you can never let them claim it as their own fire. Some people are meant for the spotlight, and some are meant to work in the shadows. But you are the one who gets to decide which you are. Don't ever let someone else build a world for you that keeps you small. I'm not hiding anymore. I do interviews now. My voice shakes sometimes, but I do them. I walk my own vineyards, my hands in my own soil. I'm building something from the ground up that is unapologetically mine. It's not about revenge. It's about truth. And the truth, I've learned, has a funny way of aging well. It's complex, it's clarifying, and its finish is long and satisfying. So that's my story. Was my decision to expose my family too harsh, or was it the only way to reclaim my life? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more. Thank you for listening.